What's going on, guys? You've made it to the final video of our three-part series talking about how to catch redfish, flounder, and speckled trout during the summer. So today we're going to talk about speckled trout, one of my favorite fish to catch and a great fish to target. I think the reason I like targeting speckled trout is because there's so many ways to do it. There's so many different places they sit. There's so many different ways to catch them. There's so many different lures to throw, which can be awesome, but it can also be really intimidating. So today I'm going to talk to y'all about the main areas I like to focus my time in the summer for speckled trout, as well as the few very simple lures that I like to throw during the summer to catch these trout. So before we get into the lures, I think it's important to first, make sure we're in the right place. So we're going to talk about what I'm looking for a good trout spot in the summer. Obviously, the first one is if you could roll up to a spot and make a cast and catch a trout right off the bat, that's a good spot. You should probably fish that. But that doesn't always happen. So the three main places I kind of like spend my time looking for trout in the summer are little current seams and breaks. And so if you've got like a marsh edge that has some creeks coming out of it, and you've got like a little inside seam, and when I say a seam, I just mean two different speeds of water next to each other. So as water flows out of a creek into another creek, there's going to be that main current falling out, but usually just behind the point or the corner of that creek, there's going to be slower water. There's going to be water that's easier for the fish to hold in, but they can still sit right there beside that faster water and target that bait as it's coming out of the creek. That's your hands down best place to start, is finding those little current breaks and picking those apart. The next thing is big, heavy structure. Just like I've said with redfish and flounder, they use these big pieces of heavy structure to sit behind in these current breaks. Like a current break doesn't just have to be on the surface. It can be down below the surface. It can be rock piles on the bottom. Those are harder to locate, but these big pieces of structure are obvious places where bait is going to get flustered. It's going to get swirled around in all these different currents, and there's going to be little pockets in which these trout can sit and ambush that bait as it comes through. Recently, I've been doing really well on larger trout, bigger trout, citation-sized trout, or just under citation-sized trout, on large pieces of structure that are around the Wilmington, North Carolina area, being big industrial docks and jetties and big rock piles that these fish use to hang out on, to get out of the current, but be able to ambush bait that's coming down current. Thirdly, oyster bars. Oyster bars in the morning and evening as that current's kind of flowing over top of them does the same thing that a point does, and it does the same thing that a large piece of structure does. It kind of makes that bait have to move around it. It gets them flustered for a second, and it gives those trout an opportunity to strike and to hopefully, grab themselves a mullet or a shrimp or some type of bait fish that they can eat. So right now we're just going to dive into these three simple lures that I like to fish in the summer for speckled trout. Honestly, a lot of times I'm really just focusing on these fish with a topwater plug. My main focus in the summertime is redfish, and so if I start a trip early in the morning, I'm going to go throw topwater for the first 2 hours for speckled trout, and I'm throwing that topwater in those same areas I've just described. You can get away with a small skitter walk, but a lot of times you can fish a big, full-size spook, which is the large head and spook with 3 hooks. You can fish the one knockers. And color is honestly, for speckled trout, a lot of times just preference. I've got buddies that will just throw chartreuse. I've got buddies that will just throw this gold mullet color. This is, my favorite color in the summertime. Bone white, anything with some light blue in it, some red and white. There's lots of colors. It's really just the noise and the action of like an injured mullet on the surface that draw those trout in. Trout are very used to feeding up. They're not they're not designed like a redfish where they feed on the bottom a lot. Not that redfish just do that, but they're more designed to feed down. A speckled trout feeds up a lot, so they're always looking up. They're looking for those mullet. If you're on a bank and you see mullet kind of showering in an area, every time a school of mullet comes down a bank and it's showering, it's probably a speckled trout sitting there in current, waiting for that bait to come by and eating it. Just because you don't see a blow up on the surface doesn't mean that he's not grabbing a mullet underneath the surface every time they come by. If I'm not throwing topwater though, I'm usually throwing a soft plastic, and I'll either rig it on a Texas eye jig head from iStrike or just a normal redfish eye, which is just a fixed jig head. The Texas eye articulates. I like a swim bait or a paddle tail because I can bounce it on the bottom, or I can just retrieve it straight back to me without really doing anything other than a few small twitches. I've caught a lot of fish recently with this bait here. In the summertime, I catch a lot more small fish on the soft plastics, and my larger fish tend to come on the topwaters. But that's not always true. You get in some of that bigger, heavier, faster water with a slightly larger paddle tail and a slightly heavier jig head, and you can catch some really nice fish there. Now the other thing is, if I'm fishing an area with a little bit less current, that I know the trout are there, maybe some of our coastal rivers, like the New River or the Neuse River here in North Carolina, where there's not much current, and to fish a lot like the areas that people target trout in the summer in Texas and Louisiana and Florida. I'll fish a mirror lure, MR17 or a 17MR, however you want to say it. I believe the correct way is 17MR. But this is just a suspending twitch bait, and it's a great bait for honestly redfish and trout. But I've caught a lot of flounder on it. But 17MRs are really known for being great trout baits. It's just a twitch, pause, and the pause really just depends on the day. Sometimes you're letting it sit for a long time. Sometimes you're working it pretty quickly. In the summertime, I can get away with working the mirror lure a lot quicker. In the wintertime, I'm pausing a lot more. But this is just another great bait for targeting trout in the summer. Well, guys, thanks for checking out the third video in this 3-part series. If you haven't seen the other ones, go check them out. We've got one about redfish. We've got one about flounder. This one was obviously about trout. Hopefully, you can take some of these tips that I've shared with y'all and some of these places that these trout like to hang out during the summertime and apply it to your next trip on the water, and you can catch some more fish. If you enjoyed the video, please press the like button. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what we talked about today and become a better angler and fisherman overall, check out the Salt Strong Insiders Club. Thanks, guys.
There's something about the water that'll give you peace, all by yourself or with your family. Live salt strong and wear the line today.